So welcome to the webinar. The agenda we're going to have today is Matt's going to talk about credit management, and then Pete's going to talk about bringing employees back from furlough, and then I'm going to give you an update on some of the latest government changes and from the government support. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our first speaker, Matt, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and about some best practice in terms of credit management.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today. So yes, my name's Matt Godby from Godby Credit Management. And I'm going to talk to you today about the crisis that we're currently experiencing to businesses with COVID-19. So a little bit about me. So I've got 20 years experience as a credit professional and supported a range of businesses in lots of different industries over the years. And I help businesses understand the importance of customer and cash flow, which is the heartbeat of every business. So I provide order to cash credit management support. So what does this mean? Well, it means a range of things, including improving the risk and onboarding, also invoicing practices being more efficient, developing credit management practices that work, and also building strong relationships with your customers, underpinned by the various policies, systems, and strategy. So making the order to cash process as efficient as possible ensures you minimize your risks, build strong customer relationships, and get paid on time, and thus increasing your cash flow and profit. So I've helped businesses across the years improve their debtors position by an average of 65% and helped increase businesses' cash income by around 250 million. So if you have a question, just put your hand up in the chat box and I'll answer that at the end. So COVID-19 is, of course, having a devastating effect to businesses of all sizes in all industries. The retail industry was hit early and very hard. Forecasters say the UK is headed for an historic slump. In the legal sector, Law Gazette reports that of the top 40 law firms studied, 38% had insufficient cash to meet 1 month's salary bills. And in a sector that's notoriously slow to change, there are a number of reports now coming out which suggest there could be further significant cash and casualties. Recent reports on SMEs suggest that 37% are unlikely to have enough cash to last more than 12 weeks of lockdown. And in construction, it's already been struggling with the uncertainties around Brexit. And the National Federation of Small Businesses say that with the coronavirus crisis being far more devastating and wider reaching than the 2008 financial crash, it has the potential to see widespread closures across the entire industry. And it says that without immediate action, and I quote, thousands of companies and their supply chains will go to the wall. And in manufacturing, only last week, Rolls-Royce announced that it is cut 9,000 jobs, 2/3 of which are likely to be in the UK. So it's enormously important in a rapidly changing landscape to act now. The old rules of taking time to plan and strategize don't necessarily apply any longer. And businesses need to act now and with urgency in order to minimize the risk of what can be a swift failure. So what are the current challenges? Well, there's reduced sales or no sales at all. Forecasters say the economy could be on track for an unprecedented 35% decline in the April to June period. A reduced workforce, either on furlough or through sickness. Remote working, people are working from home who have never worked from home before. Managers are leading from people and those managers have never been working from home before. There are various systems problems. Some sectors have more challenges than others, and law firms is a good example of this. And there are various communication issues internally and externally, which of course can lead to a reduction in productivity. There's very much a cultural change working from home. It's very different, and the motivational factors are very different as well. So there's a reduction in customer payments. So as lockdown sales now become due, some businesses now see the impact, the twin effects of heavily reduced sales and the delay in customer payments, which means that there's less cash to be able to pay your suppliers, which of course leads on to cash flow problems, which is of course the heartbeat of every business. And without cash, businesses, as we've already seen, have failed. High street brands such as Oasis and Brighthouse have already gone into administration quite early on. And further reports suggest that half of retail businesses could be in trouble by the end of the summer. So there's no business that is immune. And I've already outlined the challenges to other sectors such as legal, construction, manufacturing and SMEs. So the most important thing right now, above all else, is cash. So what actions can you take? Well, we need to get the basics right. So look at your debt book. How much is owed by your customers? And it's quite surprising that some businesses don't necessarily know for sure. Do you understand the detail behind what is owed? Check your invoicing practices. How often are you invoicing? Can invoices be sent out sooner? So if you're invoicing at the end of the month, can they be sent out daily if need be? Are they correct? Have you invoiced all the charges? And this is basic stuff, because without a correct invoice or an invoice at all, then of course customers aren't going to pay. Can you renegotiate shorter payment terms? In terms of the risks, how confident are you that your customers will pay? No, things are changing daily, so past payment patterns are no longer a good measure for the future. So do deeper research. Speaking with customers is crucial to understand this. What credit controlling are you doing? Are you speaking with your customers? Do you have contingencies if customers don't pay? Now, we're all in the same boat right now, so effective, meaningful, open, honest, and most importantly, supportive conversations are the ones to have. So we need to get, so if you're struggling, you need to get help now. Now, I heard a saying fairly recently, the economy is somewhat like an old car. It's a lot easier to stop it than it is to get it started again. So there's a risk that many businesses, perhaps SMEs, have been over-reliant on the significant government support, which by definition only takes the business along. So it's their responsibility to be looking at what they can do within their own businesses to start back up again and move forward. So what's the future picture? Well, we all know that this is just the beginning. Another report suggests that the annual output can fall by as much as 13% in 2020, which is the biggest decline in 300 years. And Chancellor Rishi Sunak admitted that there's going to be a significant recession. So we need to act now. So whereas we need to act with urgency to get through this crisis, planning for the future can't stop. There's no point in surviving this crisis if your business fails at the other end. So you need to have a future strategic plan. And with social distancing and other restrictions set to be with us for some time to come, the world will be a very different place for quite a while yet. So businesses need to be looking beyond the short term that involves various government support, perhaps, and preparing to a new way of working, which is likely to involve increased costs and perhaps reduced profit. That means even greater importance should be placed on efficient cash flow management. So it's also a good idea to use this time of perhaps reduced productivity to plan for the future. So ask yourself the question, what future strategic planning are you doing? Now, if you aren't sure where to get started, get help now. Many businesses are offering free consultations, including me. And there are a number of professional services that are partnering with businesses to provide extra value-added services above their core offering to their clients and wider business community. Accountants such as Wren, forward-thinking law firms such as Rotherers and Carter Bond have been very good at that. So if you need help, there are plenty of places to go, many with no upfront costs. Now, I developed some top 10 tips, as many businesses are doing, which has been one of our most popular guides. You can also check out the website for the helpful supporting information, where there'll be plenty of articles and video content, as well as links to the various reports and studies that I mentioned earlier on. And of course, email and the usual social media channels too, and I'm particularly active on LinkedIn. Now, we're currently conducting a survey of the business community to understand how they are coping and what actions they are taking to keep their business going. So please do take it yourself, and it is confidential. There's a link there, but I'm also happy to provide a copy of this presentation along with the necessary links to anyone who would like it. Just drop me an email. Now, there's been a common theme throughout this presentation, which is the need to recognize the challenges, to take urgent action and get help quickly where you need it. Now, there are 3 experts in mediation, accountancy and credit management on this webinar, so there couldn't be a better time to seek that support. So you can book that free consultation with me today and start taking the steps to survive the crisis and thrive the other side. So thank you for listening, everyone, and any questions?
All right, thank you for that, Matt. That was very useful. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat at the bottom, and I'm sure Matt will be happy to answer those when as we go through. Just got one more person who's just joining us a little bit belatedly, so I'll just let those in. Now, on to the next speaker. So Pete's going to be talking to us now about 10 top tips for bringing your employees back from furlough. So I will pass over to him.
Right, I was just trying to find the unmute button there, Paul, but I presume you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, Pete.
Excellent, thank you very much. So my name's Pete Colby from a company called Pragmatism. We specialise in mediation and employee relations, and I've put there the dictionary definition of pragmatism. The reason that my business is called that is because it's probably the word I've used the most in my career. When it comes to people, I don't believe that there is any law or policy that tells you how to deal with every situation that involves people. I'm now going to inflict on you a few pictures and stories about my career, just so you know who I am a little bit more. So above my head there, in the right place, because they are my bosses, are my wife Liz and my 8-year-old daughter Millie. And obviously, as for most people, family is always the most important thing, and nothing trumps that. Over on the right hand side, some strange pictures of bald chickens and my dogs. I'm a real animal lover, and I do rescue chickens that are due for slaughter and come out of those horrible places and then live in the backyard for many years. So animals is a big part of my life. Over on the left, you'll see a photo that Matt was giving me a few comments about the other day. That's from me traveling. As you'll see between the picture in the middle and that particular picture, it's over a year ago, shall we say. And that was me traveling in India. And you'll all recognize the very familiar emblem there that is the world famous Doncaster Rovers Football Club. I'm from Doncaster originally, hence the posh accent. And then least of important is the stuff at the bottom. I'm a fellow of the CIPD, which is the HR professional body. And most importantly for my career at the minute is the mediation at the bottom, which is the Civil Mediation Council. I am a qualified and accredited mediator for civil, commercial and workplace disputes. Just to carry on the infliction of telling you about me, this is my career path over the last 34 years, which started in the top left-hand corner at 16 years old. So it won't take many of you to realise how old I am. and I'm not going to talk about all of that, but the main industries that I've worked in have been the steel industry, the food industry, and the aerospace industry in the bottom right there, through 10 years at Rolls-Royce. And as Matt rightly points out, there's been some significant developments in that business. The key areas that I would pull out that's relevant to this discussion are the two areas on the left and the right where I've personally been made redundant. So I've been on the receiving end of quite devastating redundancies at the time, in particular when I've either just bought a house or just invested a lot of money in developing a house, and then your job goes. So I do appreciate how difficult it is being made redundant. The top in the centre is when I was at British Steel for 8 years. So I was then personally making people redundant, and I've made over 3,000 people redundant personally myself. And I always think that when it comes to leading people, making people redundant is the hardest thing that you can do. I'm quite comfortable with when employees are dismissed for gross misconduct, etc., because the employees have done something that's resulted in that. When it comes to redundancy, the employees have done nothing to deserve that. They've not been able to influence it. It's purely about the business economics, etc. And then the final one at the bottom in the middle is just to make the point really that I do understand it from a management leadership perspective as well. I spent 4 years in the food industry actually as a factory manager, managing 2 food factories where I had 850 people ultimately reporting to me through a management team of 16 shift managers. So I can appreciate how it is from leading people from a leadership perspective as well. So that's a little bit about me, just to get onto the crux of why Paul asked me to come to the presentation. I've kind of booked the trend a little bit in that we said top 10 tips for returning employees from furlough. I've split them into 2, returning from furlough, but also redundancy. Because I think a lot of businesses, especially when we shortly, hopefully in the next 24 hours, get updates on the government's latest job retention scheme and the contribution that they will be making, it's going to be somewhere below 80%. But I think that's going to put a lot of organisations into the redundancy camps, which hence why the final 5 are on that topic. So the first one, as regards returning employees from furlough, is really to not be surprised if people don't want to return. I think if we'd have put out a survey across the UK to ask employees whether anybody would be interested in going home, spending time with their family in the nice sunshine, not having to do any work, and being paid 80% of their wages, then uptake would have probably been pretty high. And therefore, when you're bringing people back to say, actually, we want you to come back to work now and do your job, and you're only going to get a 20% increase in your pay, then I wouldn't be surprised if some employees are rather reluctant, and I'm certainly seeing lots of examples of that already as organisations bring people back. The second is really to prepare and plan. As with everything, preparation is key. And I do think bringing people back from furlough is a bit of a project, and organisations obviously vary in size, so resource is an issue. But where you've got somebody who's a particular project manager or is good at planning projects, then I think that's your ideal person to lead those, rather than your HR person who, first of all, probably isn't naturally good at managing projects, but secondly will have enough on their plates to be dealing with these things if you have the luxury of HR people in your organisation. The third one is a running theme for everything, I would say, and that's to involve the experts, i.e. the employees. So you're probably battling with lots of things about how do we put this in place, how do we social distance, how do we minimize risks to various things. And often managers and leaders in organizations take it all on themselves to come up with those answers. And the employees are the people that know the jobs much better than you do. So they will, if you involve them in the right way and engage them in the right way, then they will come up with probably 90% of the solutions for you. So the more you can involve those and give the employees the accountability and the freedom to implement some of these changes, then you will get a better result. The next one is really about those employees, and we're seeing a lot of examples where employees are flagging up concerns about returning to work, whether that's the measures that you are putting in place in the organisation, or indeed the problems that they're leaving behind at home with family members and concerns regarding that. And I think the key thing on this, and it's back to my point about there is no law or policy that tells you the answer. Every individual will have different circumstances, different worries, and listening to those concerns, understanding those worries, and then trying to help them will be absolutely key in moving forward in a way that will avoid disputes, and in a way that will keep your employees motivated and really doing everything they can to ensure that the business is successful. Listening to understand is a key element that we do use in mediation, and often when a manager doesn't believe an employee or thinks they don't have a credible concern, often they're not really listening to what the employee's saying. They're listening for a gap in them talking so that they can tell them why they're wrong, or they can tell them what the real answer is in their view. The more we can listen to understand and then try to help, then the more likely there is to be success in getting over those barriers for the employees to return. But then the fifth point I would say on this is to not avoid the issues of people that do refuse. And this is going to be a bone of contention over the next few months as regards employees refusing to return. There is an element where, you know, people will have genuine reasons for returning, and there will be things that you can do about that as an employee, as an employer, sorry, and that's getting back to numbers 3 and 4 on that list, is about understanding those issues and knocking down those barriers so that the employee is in a position where they're no longer refusing to return. But then on the flip side, there will be employees that just refuse for unreasonable reasons, and we absolutely shouldn't avoid dealing with those employees. The contract of employment is quite a simple mechanism. It's the employee works, the employer pays. And I'm sure most employees, if we said to them, we've decided not to pay you this month, they would probably stop the work. And it works the other way around as well. And it takes proper conversations to get there, but sometimes we will be taking employees down, whether it's disciplinary routes or termination of contract, etc. Then we shouldn't avoid those situations. And we have to remember that the furloughing scheme, the job retention scheme, is actually about avoiding redundancies. But if the job is there, the work is there, and you've done everything that you can to make sure that they're safe and looked after in the workplace, then they should be returning to work. So they are my top 5 tips as regards returning from furlough. I'll come on to, I've actually produced 55 tips on this subject, so that's something I can send anybody that wants that. But moving on to the redundancy side of life, because this is something that a lot of organisations won't be able to avoid. There is a need to consult on redundancy, and I think often it's confused with negotiation. There is a big difference between consultation and negotiation. Obviously, where employers have collective bargaining and they negotiate on things such as pay. The intention is there for both parties to reach an agreement. Redundancy consultation doesn't require an agreement. It's really about listening to employees, listening to their concerns, really importantly on restructuring, listening to their alternative proposals that they may have to mitigate redundancies, etc. Back to the point I was making on the previous slide about listening to understand, I've been involved in many consultations where the initial proposal has completely changed because of the feedback that we've had from employees. To the extent where even in Rolls-Royce, when I've done some consultations on restructuring with those, the very senior people in Rolls-Royce have been almost kicking themselves because the employees at the ground level have come up with better proposals than they did. And that's purely because the employees know much better than senior management how things work. And when they flag some of the potential risks of the proposals that the organisation's putting together, then the organisation changes the proposal. So it's really important to listen to those people. But as I say, it doesn't need agreement. At the end of the day, as business leaders, you will be making a decision on whether people and whether roles will be made redundant or not. The second point I would make on redundancy is to consult early. Often organisations, they look at the minimum requirements, whether that's 30 days. So the official requirements are 30 days if you've got between 20 and 99 employees, and 45 days if you've got 100 or more employees. And just because you've only got 5 employees doesn't mean that you shouldn't consult. There's also a moral obligation. And point 2 on this slide is for me really just to say consult as early as you possibly can. Don't wait till you've got all the answers to the questions. Get the employees to help you define what those answers are and work out the best solutions. Often when organisations leave it until they've got all the answers to the questions, that stops them listening to employees' alternative proposals because they believe they've already given the appropriate level of consideration, and therefore you're not really consulting. You're almost ticking a box by just meeting with employee representatives and not really listening to what they say. So the earlier the better would be my guidance. I've already mentioned this, but alternative proposals is something that you really should encourage your employees to come up with, whether that's alternative proposals regarding the restructure that you're proposing, or actually alternative proposals. You know, there's lots of organisations out there. I don't like the word, but the latest trendy word seems to be pivot. The businesses are pivoting, so they're going from manufacturing one commodity to another, and there may well be some great proposals that your employees have regarding your wider business that you've not thought about, and to create the environment where they are willing to give you those proposals and you're happy to listen, you may well surprise yourself. As I said, I've been in some consultations where it's been amazing, the alternative proposals and then therefore the outcome that's been created through involving employees. The fourth one, which will be key to anybody who's making anybody redundant, will be to think about the criteria for selecting people for redundancy. If it's a wholesale business closure, then obviously this is not as much of an issue because everybody's redundant. But where you are selecting employees for redundancy, there's a minefield out there as regards some of the consequences that you could have. Fairness and reasonableness are absolutely critical, but then there are, as most people will know, there are protected characteristics that can be either directly or indirectly discriminatory, and therefore absolutely illegal, and the consequences financially are unlimited. So it's very, very important to do it from that perspective, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do it from a fairness and reasonable perspective. The more objective the criteria, the better. So you're not getting into blue eye boy syndrome, and you're not choosing your favourites to stay, etc., etc. There will be consequences if you do that. And I don't know if anybody's on the call's been in employment tribunals, but you don't really want to be in that position. So it's and again, it's something that I'm happy to give anybody any guidance on as regards that type of criteria. And then the fifth and final one is inevitably in redundancy situations, unless employees do come up with proposals where you're avoiding making people redundant, then unfortunately you will be in a position where you are dismissing employees for reasons of redundancy. And often, employers do it really well, and sometimes they do it really badly. But the more you can do to really look after those employees, as I say, I've been in that position twice myself, where I've been made redundant. On one occasion, I was looked after very well, and the employer did it incredibly well. On one occasion, it was quite the opposite, and it makes a very big difference to you as an individual. And thinking about outplacement support, help with CVs, a little bit of coaching. Often the employees have been there for a long time. They've never had to have interviews and things, and there's a lot of help and a lot of free help that can be given to employees who are leaving the business. So I'd really encourage you to do everything you possibly can to help employees in that situation. So that's the last of my tips. Final slide is just a few contact details. If anybody does want to contact me, I'll send this out as a PDF, so you can do any links. As I mentioned earlier, we have got 55 tips as regards returning employees from furlough. It's lots of things that hopefully people may not have thought about, but hopefully will be of some use. So if anybody wants those, happy for you to email me. We're doing various things such as training sessions for people to avoid formal grievances as things. Obviously, there's a number of disputes that could happen over the coming months. So we have got a training session next Wednesday, and there are places left on that if anybody wants to attend that. And we also do monthly updates, etc., which people can register for. So that's it from me, Paul. If you want to, I'll stop sharing this. I don't know if you're sharing something else.
Thanks, Pete. That's great. So yeah, thank you, Pete. That was really useful. Right, so we've got a question come in from Matt about what's the best way to speak to clients about payments if you're reluctant to have difficult conversations. So do you want to have a think about that, or do you want to answer that now?
No, I'll answer that now, Paul. Happy to do so. It's a question that I get asked a lot, actually, so I can answer it straight away. The difficult conversations, it's funny that Pete talked earlier on in his slide there about the difficult conversation with staff. It's the same with customers. You can't avoid them. You have to have them. The tone of conversation in the moment with customers needs to be one of supportive, but it also needs to be commercially astute. So there's lots of businesses at the moment, depending on their sizes, or businesses of many sizes really, that are struggling for cash. There's not enough cash in the chain at the moment because people aren't buying, and because we've been in lockdown for so long. So the economy is stalled, and as I said, with the old car, it's about getting it to start up again. But the conversations with your customers need to start immediately, and I would suggest to anyone that's listening is that those conversations need to be had with those customers as early as possible, not waiting for the invoice to become overdue, having those conversations right at the very start, because you need to understand, do they have the capability to pay? And if so, when they're able to pay? And if they're not able to pay, what support can you give them to allow them to pay? Because the very real challenge from businesses that I'm speaking to, particularly smaller businesses, is that the consequences of your actions are going to have a massive impact on them. So it could, in worst case scenarios, it could drive them out of business quite easily. And we saw with Wetherspoons, you know, a few weeks ago about the approach they were taking to their suppliers. But also you're actually helping support them through this crisis. So it means that they're not feeling that they need to hide away from the problems. You're actually genuinely supporting them through this crisis to allow them to make the payments that have to be made, because it's a debt and at some future point they have to pay. So you're allowing them to, as I said, support them through the crisis so that they haven't got this big debt to pay at the end, which they may not be able to pay. And then that leads on to the general enforcement action that you might inevitably have to take.
All right, thank you for that. Right, I will now go on to my bit of the presentation, which is just going through some of the government support packages that are available there for businesses. So if you're unsure about what you can claim for and what's available, there is a very useful government support finder tool, which you can find at the .gov website, the full URL there on the screen. You just literally go to that page, go to the start button and go through a step-by-step process, and it tells you exactly what support is available for your business by asking a series of questions. It is possible that you'll go through it and you'll find that at the end it says that there's nothing available, please apply for universal credit. But a lot of people have used this, clients and contacts, and found it very useful, and it's pointed them towards something they weren't previously aware of. The most recent support that's been announced recently is the bounce back loans. These were announced on the 27th of April for small and micro businesses, and the businesses can borrow between £2,000 and £50,000, and the chancellor promised that the funds would be accessed within 24 hours of approval. These are now 100% backed by the government and the taxpayer, and you can borrow up to a maximum of 25% of your business turnover. The government pays the interest for the first 12 months, and there's no capital repayments in that time either. The Chancellor's also said that the bank shouldn't be performing any forward-looking tests about business viability or complex criteria, and there's a URL on the screen there for the full details of it. Now, we've had a month or so of these now, and I'm very pleased to say that the feedback we've had from our clients and contacts is that the money is accessible a lot easier than the previous loan scheme that the Chancellor announced earlier on. But some banks are better than others. Santander seems to be turning things around very quickly. Lots of the applications that have gone into them that we've seen from clients have been turned around within 24 hours from when the application has been submitted to the receipt of funds. The record is currently 4 hours. One of our clients did one at just after 9 o'clock and had the funds in the bank account just after lunchtime. Some of the other banks are not being particularly quick. The worst that we've seen is the Yorkshire Bank. Had a couple of clients apply to them on the day that it was announced, and they've still not had receipt of funds, which is disappointing. The loans can be repaid at any point without any penalty, and after the first year, the interest rate is fixed at 2.5%. Also, getting these loans don't affect your eligibility for other government support. So for lots of clients that we've been talking to in contacts, this is a source of very cheap cash. Some people are planning it for just as a holding backstop, just in case they need it. So they're getting this money and just saying, well, I've got it there. If I need it, I will use it. If I don't need it, I will pay it back, and it's not going to cost me much. To apply, it's best just to contact your own bank directly, and all the applications are online. It's the same terms with all the banks with the same rate, so you don't really need to shop around. You will need your annual turnover figure and a copy of your last tax return or accounts to submit to the bank in support of what your turnover has been. Now, the other support that we've just seen hear a little bit more about is the discretionary grants from the local councils. So earlier on in the pandemic, the government had given these grants for people that paid business rates or were covered by small business rates relief, and you got £10,000 access quite quickly, or £25,000 if you were in the hospitality sector. but there were some smaller businesses that fell through the cracks and couldn't get those because maybe they were in serviced offices. So these are discretionary grants. The money's going to be given to the local councils, and the only criteria is that you've got to be under 50 employees and you've got to be able to demonstrate a significant drop in income due to the coronavirus restrictions. There's going to be 3 levels of grant payments. The maximum will be £25,000, and then there'll also be one of £10,000, and then there'll be a discretionary one, which is any amount under £10,000. And the local councils will use their own criteria and adapt this to the local circumstances. So this is another pot of money. It is a grant, it's not a loan, so it will be something worth applying for, but it is going to be done on a needs must basis, and the local authorities will set their own rules. I did touch base with the local authority which we're part of, which is Broxtowe, and they're still waiting for the government to provide them with the funds, and 2, also some more details about how they set their criteria. So please watch this space, keep continuing to come to the webinars and see if there's any movement on that. Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme update. This has recently been extended. I'm not going to dwell on this too much because it's been around for a long while. It's basically 80% of wages for furloughed employees that you can claim back, up to a maximum of £2,500 a month. You can also claim the employer's NIC and the auto-enrolment pension costs, which is typically 3%. The portal for claim opens on the 20th of April. The scheme was backdated to the 1st of March, and it's now been extended to the 31st of October. However, we are expecting some changes from the 1st of August. So it's going to be as it stands until the end of July, but from the 1st of August, there's going to be some flexibility introduced so that furloughed workers can come back on a part-time basis. But to do that, the employer is going to have to pay part of their wages. Unfortunately, we still don't know any more details of this. We're hoping to get them in the next few days so that people can start planning, as Pete was alluding to, how they're going to bring employees back from furlough and how they're going to sort of reintegrate them back into the business and maybe start getting them used to working again. We've also got the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. Most self-employed people should have now been, such as partnerships and sole traders, should have been contacted by HMRC by now. If you are self-employed and haven't been, you should use the link on there to check whether you're entitled to it. HMRC say that the tool's working well, but we've had lots of complaints, and there've been lots of complaints online that the check is unreliable. There's also been reports that sometimes you'll go onto the claim link and it will say that you're not eligible, but then you'll try again later and it says you are eligible. So please do persevere with it. There is a way of registering a dispute, which is on the bottom of this slide. You just register it and they should come back to you by the end of May. The other problems and issues that we've come across is that you do need a government gateway ID to apply for this. Many people don't have one. If you know what you're doing, you can easily get a government gateway ID set up, but it's not an easy process. There are lots of sort of hidden links and things. If you need some help with that, let us know. We have got a step-by-step guide. We've had lots of confused clients contact us trying to get some help with this. It is not as easy as is made out in some of the government and HMRC reports. So if you do need help, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for some help. Now, our focus after today is also going to be, again, which today moving away from the looking at the grants and moving on also to look to the future. So hence why I've asked Matt and Pete to speak today, because they're looking at addressing the future, getting some money into your business and also getting your employees back into the business and starting work for you. And we've got another webinar next week in conjunction with Roller Solicitors and also Reach Business Coaching. And that's about getting your business back on track after COVID-19 and growing for the future. That's going to cover lots of ideas about the importance of your mindset, about knowing your numbers and supporting your team, marketing ideas, time management strategies, and things about setting your terms and conditions with your customers and your suppliers. So if any of that you think is going to be useful, please do book onto the event, there's a link there. It's also on social media. Again, it's another free event. It's a slightly longer one because Jazz from Reach Business Coaching is full of good ideas. And so that's going to last from 8:30 till 11:30. If you want to come along but can't make all of it, just come for the time you can do. That's the beauty of a webinar. And there will be a recording and a link sent round later so you can watch it at your leisure. There's my contact details should you need any further information. Also, please do follow us on social media. There's lots of updates going up there all the time. So please do follow us. So thank you for watching. I'll just now stop the screen sharing and we'll see if there's any other questions or any other comments anyone wants to make before we wrap things up.
Just one thing I wanted to ask, and this applies to either of you, I suppose, really, is some of the people that I'm speaking to prompt the concerns that the various support that's out there, particularly with the SMEs, the various support that's out there is fairly substantial, which is preventing the forward planning or the mindset of forward planning and gearing back up to get back to the businesses back to full work, because the government support is so generous that it's preventing that kind of mindset to gear back up to full working. What are your guys' views on that?
Well, we've been encouraging clients not to sit back and sort of sit with their feet up in the garden enjoying the sunshine and a beer just because they've had a grant and some money off the government to furlough their workforce. And we've been encouraging them to plan for the future and to use, you know, it's an interesting term that's become a bit trendy, as Pete said, the whole idea of pivoting and making sure that you've adapted your business to the new trading circumstances. But people do need to look at their businesses, because I think things will be radically different after the whole coronavirus thing has passed, because people now have got used to the fact that people can work from home. They've also got used to the fact that things like webinars on Zoom and meetings on Zoom are much more easy to manage, and a hell of a lot less time is wasted. Just before the whole coronavirus lockdown, we had a couple of meetings that we had to go to with some contacts and clients up in Leeds, and it was literally myself and Ravi, the other director at Wren, spent an hour and 10 minutes in the car driving to Leeds. We spent 45 minutes in the meeting and then spent an hour and 10 minutes driving back from Leeds. And I said to Ravi afterwards, God, that was a waste of a lot of time there. We wasted, you know, nearly 3 times the meeting time driving there and back. And at that point, we'd not really used things like Zoom for meetings. But I think if we had that meeting request now, we would use Zoom and have the meeting, and we would have saved ourselves a couple of hours of wasted time in the car. So I think that sort of thing, people need to be ready for that. We always used to traditionally deliver some seminars to clients, but they were all pretty much traditional sit down in a hotel room seminars, and we used to do those maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And I think we will continue to do them, but they'll probably be in this format, because you don't have the same costs and challenges of getting people there. People don't get stuck in traffic, and you're not waiting around for people. And then also, you know, the content can be recorded and made available on demand afterwards, so that you get the best of both worlds. Any comments, Pete?
Sorry, I'm not very quick with the mute button. No, I agree. I think it's I think it's going to change. You know, I've been talking about employees losing their jobs and things, which is, you know, incredibly sad. But I think organisations will also, they'll be looking at how many offices they've got and how many meeting rooms they pay for and things like that. And, you know, I've been doing mediations online, and, you know, when I think about the mediations that I've travelled to 200 miles to and charged my, you know that for the travel, for the mileage, but also having to stay overnight and things like that, you know, it significantly increases the costs of a mediation when it can be done online. And we're proving now that it's just as effective. In fact, often more effective because people are at home and they're in the comfort of their own home. So I think it's just, I think it's changing the whole dynamics of the workplace. I am a bit worried that I'm hearing some organisations say, that's it, we're just all going to work from home now. And that worries me as well, because, you know, there's a lot of dynamics of people being together. So people not being able to go out for lunch together and things like that. And, you know, when I was a line manager of quite a few people, I used to, one-to-ones were usually on a walk and talk basis, unless it was really difficult conversation or whatever. We'd wander around, or would go around a local park or something and just walk and talk. I suppose you could do that on Zoom, but it wouldn't be quite as good. So, yeah, I think there's going to be some really good benefits, but I just hope people don't go too far. But I think, to your point, Matt, that the same as I was saying about our employees are actually loving being at home in the sun and all this lot, and they'll be a bit hacked off about having to come back. I hope organisations are not taking that same sort of approach, because, you know, I think about my business, you know, a lot of it's fallen off the edge of a cliff from a paid perspective, but God, I've been busy building stronger foundations and, you know, and trying to prepare for the future. And I hope that's what, you know, most organisations are doing.
Yeah, I do think you touched on that. I think there's certainly adaptability aspect to this, and I go back to the legal sector, for example, where I speak to a lot of people, and that's notoriously slow to change, very conservative, a bit somewhat navel gazing. The traditional law firms are, and this is where it kick up the backside for them, because they're simply not prepared for the adaptability that they need to get through this. So it was only the other week that I heard one law firm in the London, they simply didn't have the systems or the infrastructure to allow their staff to work from home. So their staff were still going into the office at the height of it, simply on that basis. So I think that if businesses are adaptable and if they're outward looking and forward thinking, then it's those businesses that will get through this and they'll be stronger for it. But as I think I said in the presentation there, unfortunately there are going to be casualties, and there'll be those, you know, other businesses that aren't able to adapt and see the benefits that might come out of this.
Yeah, and you know, to your point, Paul, about whatever the government's going to announce as regards the, you know, because the only thing we know is it's not going to be 80%, and, you know, and employers are going to have to fund this. I've been saying for a couple of weeks since they said that if it was me, I'd be planning on, right, if it's 75%, what's our answer? If it's 70%, what's our answer? All increments down to zero. And what does that mean for our business? What can we do? Are we going to be making part of that up for employees back to 80%? If they're still going to be furloughed, what are we going to do? Is that going to, you know, where's the line going to be when we're going to have to make people redundant? So that they're not just waiting for the Chancellor's announcement and then it's all panic. Preparation's key as far as I'm concerned.
It's like what prompted my earlier question there really was the support, the support packages that are in there are so generous that it will take an enormous amount to, you know, persuade businesses and staff to get back up again to you know, to full working, because it feels that people I speak to, because the support measures are so generous and going on for so long, you know. So it's going to be interesting how things pan out. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for some interesting input and discussion there from both of you, and thank you both for your presentations. We will be getting together and firing around the slides and the links as mentioned in the presentations to all the people that have either joined us or who registered to attend but for whatever reason didn't make it. So thank you to our speakers and the attendees. I think a really useful session with some practical things now, not just talking about the support that's available, but actually moving forward, getting customers and suppliers back on side and getting employees back into the working environment and moving the business forward. As I said, we've got another webinar next week on doing some of the marketing and the other bits and bobs with Reach Business Coaching, some ideas about how to move things forward and how to you know, really kickstart things for the business. So if people want to register on that, please feel free to do so. We're looking to try and get that as widely shared as possible. So happy for people to share it with contacts and other people as well. So thank you for your time today. I hope it's been useful, and please do get in touch if you need any extra support from ourselves at Wren, or from Pete, or from Matt with the other items that they've talked about. So we'll close there, and thank you everybody.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Take care.